Brett Kavanaugh has been confirmed, of course, and sworn in as a Supreme Court justice after a 3-month decision-making process. Could another conservative voice be good for investors? Let's ask Terry Haines from Evercore ISI and Chuck Gabrial from Capital Alpha Partners. Guys, very good afternoon to you both. Terry, if I start with you, I guess the sort of return, as it were, potentially for stocks on this sort of thing would be much slower than a different type of regulatory appointment. But is that possible in the medium term? This could help the market?
Well, my view, Wilford, all along has been that Kavanaugh is an incremental positive for markets. And the reason is very simply that he's interested in reining in and providing some stability on regulatory agencies. And, you know, we saw in the Obama administration, and I'm not singling out the Obama administration here, but we saw in the Obama administration a lot of regulators really try to overreach, and they were pulled back by the courts, by the Supreme Court and other courts, on immigration, on environmental, a bunch of other things. And so the extent that Kavanaugh is a force, a positive force for business on the Supreme Court, that positivity lies in his ability to want to rein in regulators a little bit and make it harder for them to try to go off on their own.
Chuck, we were already moving in that direction. This was a conservative court, thinking of a few high-profile ones recently, like American Express and the antitrust. Are there any other important business decisions coming up where we could really see the impact here of this new, even more conservative court?
I don't think so in the near term in this next term, Sarah, but you know, there are a lot of things that were left unsettled by previous courts, including things like how to read disparate impact and the notion of unintended discrimination against borrowers through lenders who are just literally following through and playing by the rules. So I agree with Terry that this is important because it's a bit of a check on any change in administrations that Brett Kavanaugh will sort of tip the scales towards really limiting Chevron deference, as we call it, going forward. And we think that's a really big plus, in particular for the energy and utilities sectors.
Terry, does it change the likely outcomes of the midterms, the fact that he has been confirmed to the Supreme Court, and what effect might that have on the markets?
My instinct, Wilford, is that what you get is a much smaller intensity gap, as pollsters would call it. Everyone's understood that Democratic voters were going to be very intense this year. What you get from the way the Kavanaugh confirmation happened is a greater intensity among Republican voters than had likely been expected. And there's a lot of uncertainty right now into how that plays out. So far, it has not been enough to disturb my own views that what you get is a marginally Democratic House, and I mean marginally, 10 seats or less. But you still get a Republican pickup in the Senate, and that sort of divided government means that for markets, the most important thing it means is that you're not going to get the accomplishments of the Trump and Republican Congress rolled back in the first 2 years. So there's not going to be a rollback of tax reform or anything like that.
Chuck, would you agree that that is the outcome that we're likely headed toward? And really, what does it matter for markets? I think it's a few links down the chain to try and say that it means something for policy or for investor perception of business friendliness. But I wonder how you think that plays out.
Yeah, well, Mike, I mean, the first good news is that this was just one of a number of things that could have gone wrong in September, early October that didn't, like, Mueller news and government shutdown and really bad news on trade. And we ended September, obviously, with the U.S., America, and Mexico-Canada trade deal. So, that's the first positive news. But it does matter a lot that this basically meshes with expectations that essentially we're going to get a Republican Senate, that you have additional hope of that, particularly with polls in the aftermath in Missouri and North Dakota and Tennessee really showing up well. And we would argue that the investment significance could be that if Republicans actually not only hold but gain a seat or two and boost their margins to 52 or 53 to 47, that the message to Democrats as they look at the 2020 cycle, they're probably a little less likely to have as good a shot as some might think retaking in 2020. And so the president can actually deal with a marginally Democratic House, as Terry describes, and a slightly more Republican Senate, and maybe cut an infrastructure deal, maybe even the dealing could actually start during the lame duck with a retirement savings bill. So we think the Senate really does matter, and in that respect, it is probably good news for investors.
Certainly the Kavanaugh news was the biggest of the weekend, but Mike Santoli and I were actually texting about Taylor Swift, Terry. And the fact that she opened up politically, publicly, for the first time was a very big deal. We can wonder what it means for her and her fans, but ultimately, should Marsha Blackburn and the other Republicans in Tennessee be worried?
I think that celebrity endorsements mean politically far less than most people think that they mean. The first time I will have seen a celebrity really influence an election will be the first time. And that Senate race between Bredesen and Blackburn was already tight as a tick, and it's going to continue to be tight as a tick. And the thing that I would urge people to think about as they're assessing that is, she may have picked up some intensity and some positive voter stimulation, but there's going to be a lot of people who recoil from Ms. Swift's endorsements as well. So I think it's sort of a wash.